This episode of the Police One podcast is sponsored by Officer Store. Learn more about getting the gear you need at prices you can afford by visiting officerstore.com. Hey, welcome back to Policing Matters on policeone.com. I'm your host, Jim Dudley, and we have a great guest for you today. Hey, be sure and check us out on YouTube where you can see me and my guest and maybe a graphic or two. Well, I'm sure most of you out there have seen The Silence of the Lambs, unapologetically one of my favorite movies. You may think that the lead character, FBI fledgling serial killer investigator Clarice Starling, was purely a fictional character. To be sure, there are some artistic freedoms taken in the movie, but the character, in fact, was modeled after my guest today. Jana Monroe was one of the first analysts, and at the time, the only female agent in the world-renowned FBI Behavioral Sciences Unit at Quantico, Virginia. She consulted on more than 850 homicide cases, including infamous serial killers Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Edmund Kemper, and Aileen Wuornos. Monroe was also the model for Clarice Starling in the movie version of The Silence of the Lambs, and she even helped train Jodie Foster for her Oscar-winning role. In her book, Heart of Darkness, Monroe tells her story of her life and career in shaping law enforcement and intelligence analysis. Well, welcome to Policing Matters, Jana Monroe.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's great to be here.
Yeah, what a great story you have, and a lot of history. What drove you into the law enforcement career? Not mentioning dates, but it was a different era back then with few women in the field.
Yes, it was a different era. Sometimes I feel 105. I'm not, and we aren't going to mention dates, but I think innately, it's kind of in my DNA. I'm very public service oriented, and I wanted to do a kind of work that would help others, would help people. And I knew I wasn't going to be going into the medical field. It was a great field, but that one wasn't for me. And so at the age of 13, I knew what I wanted to do. I know that's very unusual, but I knew I wanted to be in law enforcement, and I knew eventually I wanted to be in the FBI.
That's awesome. And then the first 5 minutes of Silence of the Lambs, we see Jodie Foster running the yellow brick road up and down trails and ropes and obstacles. You went all through that, and then you graduated. What was your first assignment?
My first assignment was Albuquerque, New Mexico. And even though that's on the West Coast and I was from California, I was from Los Angeles. So going to Albuquerque was kind of like landing on the moon, because as a new agent, they assigned me to all of the Indian reservations, which was a great experience, but somewhat sad and somewhat depressing with kind of the Native American situation. Most of the crimes there were incest, alcohol related, homicides. So for a first office, I got a lot of experience.
Hmm. Yeah, a buddy of mine served 18 years with me at the San Francisco Police, retired early and went into religion. He became a priest and he worked on the reservations. I've visited him. I know exactly what you're talking about. Really tough situations there. So you're out in the middle of the desert in New Mexico, and then you find yourself at the behavioral science unit back at Quantico. How'd that happen? And what'd you do from there?
Well, actually, I got transferred from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Tampa, because in between there, I got married to a fellow agent, Dale Monroe, and he was in Tampa. So the Bureau, the FBI calls it, they like to accommodate a common household. So they transferred me to Tampa. And when I arrived there, I worked on a criminal squad. I was the only female on a criminal squad. Mostly they were on espionage or white collar crimes. And I became what they call an NCABC, the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime coordinator. And as a field agent, I worked with Quantico, with the behavioral science unit, for any of the cases in that area that would be appropriate to send back to Quantico for them to either do a link analysis, profile, investigative techniques, whatever it is the local law enforcement agency was asking for.
And so when did you start getting involved in the actual cases themselves, going to crime scenes, interviewing these suspects? Can you tell us about any particular case that you were involved in?
Well, the one case that, and I do mention this in the book because it's the only case out of the numerous that I had the opportunity to work on that I got to see from, if you call it beginning to end. Because in the behavioral science unit at Quantico, we typically work on one aspect of the case. You know, the investigators obviously have jurisdiction, the locals and state people do. So they ask us to do usually one thing. This one, I was at the scene of the Rogers case. It was a mother and two daughters that were killed and left floating in Tampa Bay. So I was at the crime scene, and after that, I didn't work on the case, but I was transferred to Washington, D.C. and to the behavioral science unit. So fast forward a year later, the case had gone cold. So the agency who had the jurisdiction brought it to Quantico and asked for our assistance for investigative techniques. So we got that all put together. They did a fabulous job of following some of the leads that we worked together on. Found the suspect by blowing up some handwriting that was found in the victim's vehicle, and nobody had identified that handwriting. We put it up on billboards. So this is before the internet, right? So this was like the internet. Put it up on billboards in on biggest street, Dale Mabry in Tampa. And that crime had had such a negative impact on Tampa because it was, you know, killing the tourist business, killing, no pun intended. But anyway, it was recognized. We had several people call in, identify the person as Oba Chandler. Fast forward, they found him. He was found guilty and executed.
Wow. Based on handwriting analysis.
Well, that was the lead. Yes, absolutely. Because it had gone cold for, I don't know, 14, 15 months.
Wow. Yeah. So, yeah, that brings to mind a question about technology. In without going back, we think about all the advantages that we have today of DNA. We've always had fingerprints since turn of the other century. Um, those were big challenges back then. I mean, you're really working on interview and interrogation skills and the basics of handwriting. You had hair analysis and blood analysis and things like that. What were the changes while you were there that helped you solve more cases? Were there any breaking technologies or investigative techniques that you picked up while you were there?
Absolutely. DNA being one of them. When I first got in the unit, we didn't have that capability, didn't have luminol. So a lot of the things, if not, I'm not plugging forensic files, but since that show does depict real cases and that the whole part of it is the forensics, a lot of the things that the cases that they highlight were at the time that I was working on cases. And so it was a big deal to have the luminol to go back with cold cases, cases that, 9, 10, 11 years old that officers had, appropriately preserved the evidence. And so we were able to take that and solve the cases. It was really exciting time.
Yeah, we've had several detectives on the show talk about they're doing cold case homicides and sexual assaults dating back 30 years, and now with the breakthrough not just in DNA but also the ancestry
Yes.
apps that are helping lead to relatives of relatives of relatives of the murderer, and they're able to
Yes.
sift through and find them. Wouldn't that have been great while you were there?
Oh my God. Yeah, that would have been a huge help. Yeah, that's part of the thing that's exciting about it. But none of these things, or I should say, all of these things are techniques and tools, and they do not take over the fact that you still have to be a good investigator. You have to pay attention to details. You have to know what it is you're looking for when you go to ask questions. You ask open-ended questions, of course, and don't be judgmental. But I think sometimes with the advance of this technology, people who are newer in the field rely very heavily on that and maybe don't focus as much on their good old investigative work.
Hmm. Yeah, so tell me about the nuances. How did you work if, say, you were asked to consult on a case, you had maybe a small town or even a larger town with a case, and you're coming in as fresh eyes to look at what they've done so far. What was the acceptance level back then?
Well, again, taking a look at it, these cases that were brought to the behavioral science unit it was because by invitation, they were asking us for help because we didn't have jurisdiction on that. So it was a very, for the most part, very symbiotic working relation, very cooperative. And I really enjoyed that part because it was actually the teamwork that you look for, right? So everybody was, people brought different sets of eyes, different sets of experience. You put all that together, and it was really very good energy for looking at cases. So my experience, my 5.5 years there was one of very mutual cooperation. And I think also being housed at the behavioral science unit was at Quantico, and the National Academy, which is well, we won't go into that. I'm sure you've discussed that before, but the National Academy was there with the police officers, and there was so much opportunity to interact with them, even if they were not involved in a certain case. I would sometimes invite them into a consultation also for their expertise.
Yeah, I mean, the FBI Academy for Law Enforcement, I think, is a great opportunity for, like you say, a symbiotic or a mutual relationship where we were asked, when I was in my session, we were asked to get into groups and present a case from start to finish, how we solved them. And I think, the benefit was in getting critiqued or getting advice on the case, but also in sharing how we did it at our level with other agencies, not just across America, but internationally, and also with the behavioral science unit as well. It was a fantastic opportunity to show off a little bit.
Yeah, and you mentioned about large agencies or small agencies. A point to that, which is interesting because it really, you look at some of the very small rural areas, and a lot of those that would come to us, they hadn't experienced a case like this. They really did not know how to investigate it, or they did not have the resources to do that. And I remember one that was funny, asking for aerial shots before the two officers were coming to Quantico, said, we're going to need, a variety of things. One of them is an aerial shot of the crime scene. Well, they got on the cab of his truck and took a shot. They didn't have any kind of
Oh boy.
aviation or whatnot, and somebody, yeah, that was the best he could do. And I just remember trying not to laugh, but I'm like, then we had somebody from LA Sheriff's Department come in, and a whole different ballgame. We had a few from New York, and they had all kinds of resources. So very different was to what they brought to do the consultation.
Yeah, so I think about the advantage, the technology advantages today, and the fact that almost any agency in America can have access to a drone. You don't have to have a helicopter or a fixed wing, but just the amazing technology from drones today and how useful they can be, not just in those aerial shots, but in
Oh,
evidence
yes.
reconstruction, crime scene reconstruction to the inch, as if a CSI analyst was drawing it up, freehand.
Yeah, drones are amazing. And like a lot of technology, they're great when they're used for the right purpose, but not so much if there's something nefarious. But yeah, they have assisted law enforcement extremely.
Yeah, yeah. The bad guys, I don't think have touched into their capabilities just yet. Well, I want to ask you about the challenges that you might have had in your career and more of the high profile cases. But first, I'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsor. Officer Store, equipping protectors with passion. That's how we operate, and it's how we live. We understand that having the right gear can mean the difference between life and death. Our goal is to get you the gear you need, when you need it, at prices you can afford. Visit us at officerstore.com. And we're back, and I'm speaking with Jana Monroe, retired FBI special agent and author of Hearts of Darkness. Wow, Hearts of Darkness. I'm sure you've seen some depravity over your time. We actually just had Ann Schwartz. She was the reporter who was first on scene at the Jeffrey Dahmer case. Chilling recollection on her part of that crime scene. Well, not to give away all of your book. We want our listeners and our viewers to buy your book, but tell us about the aha moments in some of these cases. Like, what really struck you or maybe sent a chill down your back as you're talking to some of these characters?
Yeah, I like that term, the aha moment, because there definitely were. And the serial killers that I interviewed were all, incarcerated, right? And there was nothing that we, the FBI, could do for them. We couldn't get a stay of execution, better food, a different prison. So there was nothing, no bargaining chip, if you will. So the approach that we took was kind of hat in hand saying, you're the one that's the expert at this. We need to learn from you. And there are kind of two ways. Some of them were like, okay, and I think it was a pretense, but yeah, I'll tell you this information because I don't want others to do this. Or just play to the ego, and it's like, yeah, I got away with 28 homicides, so I'm really good at this, and so I'll let you know what I did. You're not very bright, so I'll help you out. So those things. But some of we knew the cases, right? You have to study the cases before you go in, and it's not a news revelation that they lie. So it was good to have done your homework ahead of time to know what really happened, and then ask them things. But some of the forthcoming statements that would be made about what they had done, severed a head, done this and that. Edmund Kemper, who was a very prolific serial killer, I always say is one of my favorite. That sounds kind of ghoulish, but what I mean by that is he was, if you believe in IQ tests, he was brilliant, 160, 180, he tested all over the place, but truly a sociopath. I won't go into the case because it's too long, but my aha moments with him were, and some of this was on films when the psychiatrists were talking to him, he would try to show emotion. He had been matricide, killing your mother, that was his last victim, was a horrible thing. Well, he could say those words, he was very articulate, but he could not conjure up a tear. And here you're looking at this time, a 40-something-year-old man trying to make his facial like sad, and it was very contrived, and you could see that. And to see him struggling, such a bright person like that, to me, he epitomized the sociopath, and it was just chilling, listening to him.
Yeah, some heinous things that he did with his mom post-mortem. Yeah.
Right. And I think you look at also a Hannibal Lecter, who, thank goodness, was a fictitious character. However, he was a compilation of some of the serial killers. And one of the ones, and no name recognition, but that I interviewed, the same thing. He would go into extreme detail about what he did in some very gruesome crimes. And he, unlike Kemper, would actually kind of smile. You could see a glee, and he was reliving the moment, and he derived pleasure from that. And that also would just, I had to, you can't have any expression or emotion. You're just past judgment or anything. You're just taking notes. And that part was really, really challenging.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, they want to show off. They want to show how smart they are. That's sometimes how we catch them, right?
Right.
And we struggle between the public's thirst for knowledge in these cases. I mean, podcasts, true crime podcasts, the books, the serial TV, no pun intended, but the TV shows. Yeah, I mean, they're big in the public, and we want to appease them to some degree, but in some cases they involve a manifesto from a madman, as I call them. Where do we draw the line in saying, okay, we're not going to go into all that? I mean, there's some things that I just won't watch because I don't want to know the details.
Right.
Over my career, I've seen a lot, and in cases where I was assigned to the case. I did them, put my head down, did the work, but I wasn't so curious that I went to, look over the shoulder of someone else in a real live case. Where do we draw the line in how much we show the public?
Thank you. That is an excellent question. I have struggled with that for years, and I can make this analogous when you're on a freeway and there's an accident, right? A traffic accident on the other side. And so you're wondering, well, why are we stopping on this side? The accident's over there. Well, it's because of your people looking at it, right? And it's that compelling and repulsive at the same time. And I look at the serial crime, or homicide, let's just say, it doesn't have to be serial, it's the same way. And in my opinion, you see the tension between the public interest and the media coverage, and then there's that ethical handling of the serial killer cases. And that becomes, I think, particularly acute when manifestos or personal writings are involved, because then it's like these are documents, and that expresses the killer's distorted view or grievances. And simultaneously with that, you've got people that are fascinated by it and horrified. And it's that balance of, especially I think for responsible journalists, as to where to draw that line for public safety and the potential harm caused by amplifying or glorifying. And that's one of the things I put in my book, is in the forward to it, is that it's for the too many victims of violent crime and the loved one who grieve their losses, because people have far more name recognition with these notorious heinous killers than victims typically.
Yeah, so we're talking about historical serial killers. I mean, their names are synonymous with these kinds of crimes. I try not to mention their names either, and it's at the risk of, setting off a copycat or someone with
Right.
like-mindedness who may want to, use it as a template, if you will, for their own deeds. I like that. So as a woman in a dominated field, certainly, especially in that era that we're talking about, not to go into the eras, but I'm talking about the 80s, and maybe even the 90s. What was it like? Did you come upon any resistance, or did you find the fact that you were in these roles that you were easily accepted?
No, there was no welcome wagon. Wasn't easily accepted. However, one of the things that I don't engage in at all is history revision or looking back and trying to change something. It was the way it was, and it was a different time. So I don't cast aspersions on my male counterparts. And what I learned, Jim, is the more I was able to prove myself, because I did go into a field that I knew I was qualified for and capable of. If I wanted to be an opera singer, I was going down the wrong road, right? But I knew I could do this. And so I'd say even worse than resistance was being dismissive. It's almost like being invisible, right? They would, especially in the FBI, the police department was different, but I'm going to focus on the FBI for now, because they were the last federal agency to allow women into the bureau. It was after J. Edgar Hoover passed away that there was a class action suit to allow women in. But I would say when the FBI had the advantage typically of not being first responders, and even if they were, they went in numbers, right? And so I would not be invited. It's like being on a playground, and it's like, we'll take 6 of these guys, and whatever her name is here isn't coming. So when that term about I need a seat at the table, I knew I wasn't going to get one of those, so I brought a folding chair, and I would invite myself, and I would know what some of the cases were I took the initiative myself to say, oh, you're working on the such and such case. Where's the arrest? Where's the op order? I want to come. And I did work harder because I did that to gain experience. And for me, it worked because once I had my first arrest, I wasn't supposed to be a part of it. I mean, the first arrest that I went on with the guys, and the case agent, we called him, the lead on it, as we get to, it was a vehicle stop, he throws the handcuffs to me and said, cuff him. Well, if I hadn't been confident, be like, oh, now fortunately I caught the cuffs, that number one, that was good. But I mean, if I was like, oh, I don't know how to handcuff him, or what do I do? So I did it, and just like my male counterparts would have. So the little tests along the way, I was fortunate enough to pass most of them.
Yeah, that's great. And now we have initiatives like the 30 by 30 initiative to attract women, 30% women in law enforcement by 2030. Uh, are we there yet now?
No, no. And I'm always cautiously optimistic about numbers and initiatives. There's a 50-50. It was 2020 women on boards. That's speaking about corporate boards. And now it's 50-50. And I think having this initiative and focusing on it is great, but there's a comma, however, again, you have to be cautious as to have numbers. You need people who are qualified for the position, trained for it, have all of the right characteristics that you're looking for. Not, back in the day, we used to call it a token, but I'm going to use that, but not just somebody because they fulfill a number. But I think the focus and the highlight, I think the 30-30 initiative is great.
Yeah, so thinking about your career and all the horrific things you've seen, the vicarious trauma from victims and their families that you've come across over your career. What have you been doing for yourself? What maybe would you have done differently, knowing here you are at the end of that career, and what are you doing now to take care of yourself?
Okay, I think there's like three questions in there, but let me let me give it a whirl. Um, yeah, I think like so many people in a law enforcement or military cocoon, when you leave that either to go into another career, a job, retire, and again, don't retire from life. I think I became very introspective. I pay attention to details anyway, and I looked at like there's a whole world out here, right? A whole other world where there are different standards, there are different things you can do, different opportunities. Again, I really like public service. I have joined some charitable organizations. I do community service work. I love that. Not only are you helping others, you meet some great people. And I've enjoyed meeting people from different backgrounds. I still, of course, love my law enforcement brethren, but there are people that do other things. And so that's opened up a whole new world. I've always been into fitness and health. I'm actually even a little bit more into that. Vitamins and all those kind of good things. I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that's what I do. And I I've learned the word retire gives a connotation that you're sitting with your feet up on a coffee table watching daytime TV. Now, for me, that has never happened. I wrote the book. I've had some unexpected success for it. I wrote it, like I said, to highlight the victims and to tell a little bit about cases and the FBI from my experience because it's accurate. It's not a TV depiction of it. And then to my surprise, we're been offered 5 different TV studios we're pitching to for a TV series. I don't know if that'll come to fruition. But that kind of comes back to what you were talking about, the sensationalizing of things and fictionalizing it. And I think when you look at stories that are loosely based on, this will probably be loosely based on. But I've also found, and I don't mean to sound like a Pollyanna because I'm not, but I've really learned to appreciate things more. And I start my day either with a devotional or looking at, I look outside. We're blessed to have a nice backyard, look out and say, hey, this is great. And even I would say it's not a contrived positiveness, but I'd like to start out that way. And to me, it's been very helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Those are all great. Fitness, we've had so many health and well-being experts on the show, and we talk about the importance of sleep and fitness and nutrition and tempered alcohol and things like that. Sounds like you're doing it all, and sounds like you've got, very little residual effects from this fantastic career.
Well, yeah, thank you. Like I said, I've worked on it. I know we just briefly covered those things, but I've worked on it with intent. It was something that I was aware of, and I didn't want to, have that drag me down. I think especially today, well, I guess historically, there's a lot of ugly things going on. I'm aware of them, but I don't focus on things that I can't have an impact or an influence. I have put in
Mhm.
perspective what it is I can do, and then the things that I can't, I go along with my business.
Yeah. So like you said, I stuck 3 questions in there. Let me go back and ask you, what would you recommend someone in the field today? Tough day, saw some awful things, come home. Now you watch daytime TV, grab a big tumbler of your favorite imbibe, and is that your recommendation?
No, no, not at all. Um, what I used to do, and I would, and there are bad days, as you know, sometimes it's the people that you report to, or
Yeah,
I had to
organizational
testify
stress.
before, yeah, I had to testify before Congress. That was fun. But I think, to me, I would go out. I'm not able to do that. I would go out for a run. Exercise is like an elixir for me. Now I go out for a walk. I'm fortunate to have a small cadre. I'm actually going to refer to them as friends, people that are a support group. And I like to think I'm a good friend. And so the times that I need someone there for that support, I've been blessed to have that. I think getting you can be good to yourself without having a tumbler of whatever and running away from it. So whatever the things are that you like to do, be it exercise, be it read a book, the distractions. Some people like to do house chores, whatever that is. If you've identified it, do that. And I think for me, looking back, I would have told my younger self, and I'm going to just say myself because everybody's different. I did work a lot. And was always trying to, like prove myself here, that, and it was successful. But I don't think now, especially after a certain point in a career, that it was really necessary. I would have focused more on some of the things that I am now, other aspects of life.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. Hey, Jana Monroe, retired FBI special agent and author of Hearts of Darkness. Look for it on the shelf or audio versions, or if you can wait it out, maybe it'll be the next serial, if you will, on television, cable. Hey, thanks so much for spending time with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. It was my honor. It was great.
Yeah. Well, look forward to reading or listening to your book. Thanks so much. Take good care.
All right. You also. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.